Thank you for joining us for today's webinar hosted by the NIH-funded MD2K Center based at the University of Memphis. Today's webinar is on Cerebral Cortex, the open source data collection and analytic platform developed by the MD2K team, led by Tim Hnat, the chief software architect for MD2K, and Nazir Ali, core developer of the Cerebral Cortex. Just a little housekeeping. A recorded version of this webinar will be made available on the MD2K's mHealth Hub. Please make sure that you are on mute. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the question box in your BlueJeans control panel. We will also have some time for questions at the end of the webinar. With that, I will turn it over to Tim Hnat, the Chief Software Architect. Tim?
Thank you, Vivek. Let me see if I can get the slides up. Are we good?
Yep.
Yes, thank you. So I will change your title slightly. So we're going to talk about an open source platform for computational modeling from high frequency sensor data. As Vivek introduced me, I'm Tim Hnat, the Chief Software Architect, and Nazir will be coming in later to describe a lot of the details about this platform. So just a quick shout out to the entire team that has kind of made this possible, both through software development, testing, documentation, everything that we're kind of talking about and we release here at the center. These individuals have a huge impact on that. So there's a lot of hardware devices out there. Maybe it's the Apple Watch, a Fitbit, or an Android Wear OS device on the market. They produce data that kind of gets ingested by relevant platforms. Maybe it's ResearchKit or HealthKit, or it's Fitabase, or it's Google Fit. Ultimately, these platforms have produced or gone on to be successful in the biomedical research world, and have provided great value to lots of projects, such as providing self-reports, intervention, various types of marker data. However, these types of platforms do not target the process of what we call biomarker development and or validation, which is key to this computational modeling approach. To support this, and the data science researchers that are providing kind of this next generation of biomarkers, we ultimately needed a platform that was able to process this high-rate, high-frequency sensor data and turn it into these models. There are some key components that are necessary to make this happen, such as you need to kind of support this lab study where you can go get ground truth, like labeled data collection, ground truth video, coupling that with a bunch of field studies to get large-scale data sets from real-world environments. So we built our entire ecosystem around this kind of development and validation of these markers. Today, we're really going to talk about how the Cerebral Cortex platform goes into analyzing and all of the signal processing for this data. So just to kind of take another look at this, this is a typical computational modeling workflow. If we start with data, one of the first things that we need to deal with is how do we clean that data and how do we prepare that data for all of the subsequent stages. Typically this data is quite noisy, or it's missing information, or there's corrupted data. There could be a whole slew of things that we have to kind of filter out ahead of time. The next stage is kind of visualizing that data, and with the goal of trying to figure out what types of new features I want to add to either my library or my models, so that I can kind of advance the science in particular areas. Once you've figured out what those types of features are, they'll typically be in one of three types of domains, whether they're time domain features or they're frequency domain features, or maybe they're statistical features. But we have to compute all of those features on top of these data sets. And then finally, you go into this training of a model. You have to make a decision here. Which model do I use? There's hundreds, if not thousands, of types of models out there. And then once you have these models trained, you need to validate them against ground truth or labeled data. And ultimately, if you will kind of repeat this process over and over and over again until you arrive on some sort of trained model that is of sufficient accuracy for your research. So some of the challenges that go into this is really the coding and the effort time. So these are the steps that we just went through, the pre-processing, exploration, computation, training phase. And if you're well versed in programming, maybe you want to start with Python and you want to leverage a bunch of libraries. So there's lots of these libraries out there. This is just a selection of them. And in many of our cases, we'll leverage Python along with some libraries to deal with signal processing, such as NumPy, SciPy, and Pandas. We generally have coupled that in the past, and researchers here in our lab, with Matplotlib or Seaborn to do some visualizations on top of that. And typically we run this on top of Jupyter notebooks. And for certain research, we will leverage some of the deep learning tools, such as PyTorch or TensorFlow. So there's already a lot of tools in play, and each tool has its own kind of specific nuances, quirks that you have to understand in order to effectively use them. So when you do this, we're looking at, if you just stuck in Python, you're probably looking at months and months and months of effort just to write your code. By leveraging these libraries, you kind of turn this into weeks, ideally. So in general, all of your research will be improved by kind of further speeding up this process. When we look at the computational effort instead of the coding effort, what we really see is a modeling process that's development, computation, evaluation, development, computation, evaluation. And just like the coding, this is an iteration cycle of somewhere on the order of weeks to months. Again, this is quite an expensive operation in terms of time. In a lot of scenarios that we've seen, this is typically done by graduate students or research labs, and everybody runs this on their laptops because that's the machine they have, and it's generally not the fastest computer in the world. What we really want to do is take that computation and port it over to a much larger scale cloud, whether that's Microsoft, Google, or Amazon. Unfortunately, the way most of these libraries work is they're really incompatible with the way you would write software locally on a computer versus to be able to run that in the cloud, which usually requires learning new frameworks. There's a much larger learning curve, and they generally just don't scale. The final challenge I want to kind of highlight here is reproducible research. So science is a lot about reproducibility. And reviewers are they're always asking about how do you compare your work with other work? And in this world, most of the time machine learning models are not closed form. They're very hard to reproduce just from the information in publications. And so there's a significant effort that goes into comparing your work with the work of others. As a result, progress on these efforts is generally quite slow. So if you had access to trained models, algorithms, data from prior papers, this could greatly improve the situation and allow you to make these comparisons in a kind of a much faster mechanism, or much faster mechanism. So to look at computational modeling within Cerebral Cortex, it's really targeted at doing three specific things. And there's others, but we're going to highlight these three. And number one, its goal is to reduce coding time. It does this both by including a bunch of pre-built algorithms that are either just generally available or generally needed, or they're specific to publications that have leveraged this platform. And it couples that with a set of data visualizations that allow a researcher to more easily visualize the data that they want to work with without having to write a bunch of code and software just to look at this type of high-frequency data. It also reduces the computation time by effectively including scalability into the abstraction that you write software in. So any code that's written under this platform can both be run locally on a laptop or at scale, such as Amazon, on thousands of CPU cores simultaneously. And to enable reproducible research, the models that we've done research with, or that we've reduced via research on this platform, have been incorporated into the libraries and into the repositories and are available for anyone to go download and use. To go with this, all of our platform is open source and available on the web right now, making these models available to anyone. So with that, I will turn this over to Nazir to talk about the details of what Cerebral Cortex is, and then we'll conclude with a little bit of a question and answer at the very end. Nazir?
Hi all, I'm Nasir. Can you guys see my screen presentation?
You need to take over the screen, I think.
Yeah.
Did you?
So, can you see the screen now? Presentation?
You're good.
Yeah. So, thanks, Tim. Now I'll show you how to use Cerebral Cortex and talk about some of the functionality. We have made some Cerebral Cortex code demos as well in the Jupyter notebook. So I'll show you some of them during this presentation. So I'll switch between slides and Jupyter notebook demos. So to use Cerebral Cortex, all the functionality that Tim already has described briefly, the first step is to have the data. So there are two ways. The first one is you already have some publicly released datasets. Like for MD2K, we have released some datasets that are already compatible with Cerebral Cortex, so you don't have to do anything. I'll just show you the page. So here is the page where you can go and download publicly released datasets. So this is the latest from the MORO dataset, and we also have released some models as well for this dataset. So you can just download that dataset and Cerebral Cortex and start playing with Cerebral Cortex functionalities and explore and develop or get more insights or do much more bigger or different things than just brushing. So this is the first way to import the data, but there's another way. The second option is if you already have some data that you collected using some of your devices and you want to bring that data inside Cerebral Cortex. So Cerebral Cortex also supports importing data inside external data inside Cerebral Cortex. So if you want to bring your own data, so it's as simple as just calling one Python method that can import all your data. You just have to pass the folder some CC Cerebral Cortex configuration and where your data is located. Here you can see just one CSV example that can import all the data. So there are a couple of benefits attached to importing data in Cerebral Cortex. The first one is the data format that Cerebral Cortex uses is scalable to large data sets, so it can support dataset size in terabytes. And the next benefit also, it can also help to fast the scanning of your data, so you can scan some chunk of your data or all the data, or filter or perform other operations really fast and scalable in distributed manner. The second benefit is when you are going to share your data, like if I have a CSV file, if I'm going to share it, so I might not be able to pass all the information that is linked to the data set. So using Cerebral Cortex, you can document all your data at each column level. So what column name is, type, and all the description, other attributes, or other lineage information, how that data was produced, or which modules were used to produce that data. And in this example, you can see I'm just importing CSV, but if you have a different format that's more complex, so you can just write one simple Python method that can parse that file, and you can pass that method to import library of Cerebral Cortex. It's as simple as just passing that method to this method, and it will adopt to your parser and import all the data in Cerebral Cortex. I'll show you the demo here. So how you can simply import your data. So this is Jupyter Notebook. So Jupyter Notebook is used to write code interactively. So the first step is you just import some dependencies. The second one is call import library, pass the path. So after it's done, it produces a report that shows you how many files were successfully imported and if something was missed, why it was missed. So here it will tell you how many files were failed and the reasons why they were failed. So for example, if there was some problem with the parsing of the file or the data column that are there, they mismatch or there's some incompatibility. So you'll get the report here after it's done. And once you import, you can start quickly analyzing your data. You can just print and start seeing your data in Cerebral Cortex format. And as I said, you can document your data as well. So Cerebral Cortex provides you different APIs to document each and every column, each module of your data. So once you document, here how it will look like. So for example, the name of the column, the type of the column, if there's any description, what it represents, some random values, if there's any range. So you can add as many attributes as you want for each column. And you can provide any description at the dataset level as well. And if there was any modules that were used to produce this dataset, or if there was any author or any other information. So it's we have predefined metadata structure that you can add multiple fields in. So that's how you can document. So next time when you're sharing your data, so the person who is receiving will have all this information. So it would be easier for them to interpret your data and do something with it. So once you have all your data in Cerebral Cortex, you can start exploring your data using some built-in APIs Cerebral Cortex offers. So Cerebral Cortex offers some methods for data preprocessing, such as data filtering, splitting, interpolating, etc. So once you perform all the preprocessing, Cerebral Cortex also provides you some visualization capabilities that can help you to explore the data and get insights of your data, how it looks like, that can help you to build your feature or define your features. So I'll move again to Jupyter Notebook. So for example, if you have some phone, so in this example, I have generated some synthetic data for phone battery. So if you want to just filter some data, so it's simply, you have data stream that. So I'll just briefly explain you how you can get the data from Cerebral Cortex. So you just define Cerebral Cortex kernel, define an object, and this, by the way, this demo is available publicly. So at the end, I will show you how you can get access to this demo and run by it yourself. So there is this method, get stream, and it will return you all the stream data. So you can print some statistics like count, standard deviation at the dataset level, the quartiles for each column. You can also define the columns that you need, or if you want to exclude, and you don't need all the summary for all the columns. And for pre-processing, so it provides you some filtering, data filtering options. So it supports operators, so you can pass the column names and operators and the value. And for example, if I just want to see the data where all the battery levels are more than 97%, I can just simply parse the data and show it. So there are different filters, pre-built filters as well, that can help you to filter the data. And for example, if you want to interpolate, so it's simple, is just calling .interpolate, and you can pass the method linear or any other method that you want to use for interpolation. So, and if you don't want, if at some point you want to have pandas data frame that you want to use for some other data processing or some other libraries that require pandas data frame. So you can just simply call toPandas and it will return you the pandas data frame. And then you can do anything that you can apply on pandas data frame. As I said, it also supports some visualization capabilities to explore your data. So you can just call data.plot and you will have all the data plotted in Jupyter Notebook, and you can just zoom in and get more insight at different levels how your data looks like. So this is basic graph. So we have other visualization capabilities as well. So this is just a demo. So let's say if you have a stress model and you predicted stress and you computed everything and you want to visualize and see how it looks like, how data is there. So in this example, in this demo, I just synthetically generated some stress data to show you the capabilities of visualization. So again, get some data from that stream from Cerebral Cortex and plot. You can do the pie chart plotting or Gantt graphing to get insights of your data. And there are several options available for visualizing your data. So there are some basic examples how you can visualize your data. Okay, so once you have explored data and defined what features you would need to compute, the next step would be to write code to compute those features. As Tim already mentioned, that there are so many libraries that you can leverage and write your code and move your coding time from months to weeks. And here is an example. Let's say you want to chunk data into 60 seconds and compute average on multiple columns. So that's a basic feature, statistical feature that you want to compute using Spark. So is there any easy way to perform the same task in Cerebral Cortex? So yes, Cerebral Cortex simplifies that logic and it gives you just one line that you need to write. So you just need to say data.computeAverage and define your window size. So currently we support static and sliding windowing for different computation feature. And there are some other parameters as well that you can pass and customize the computation of your features. Here is another example on how Cerebral Cortex can reduce your coding time. Let's say you want to compute features on top of location GPS data. The first step is to cluster GPS data. In traditional way, you can simply import a bunch of Python libraries such NumPy, Pandas, etc. to reduce your coding time. However, there is no straightforward way to write the code and scale this code to multiple machines. So just performing the same operation using Cerebral Cortex, it simplifies. So Cerebral Cortex offers some built-in algorithms and some feature computations. So in this one, it's just simply importing GPS cluster from Cerebral Cortex and applying that algorithm on your data and also performing the windowing that you want to. If you don't want to perform windowing or do the sliding, you can pass other parameters as well. On the left side code, you can see the number of lines and the complexity of the code. I removed some of the code from there because I cannot fit. And this code on the left side doesn't even include windowing. So if you want to perform windowing on the top of it, you have to write a couple of more lines or a couple of more methods. So here is the example, the same example in Jupyter Notebook. So in this demo, we again synthetically generated some sample data for location. So you can just again access the data, retrieve the data from Cerebral Cortex, and perform that clustering. I'll just run again to show how slow it is. I'm running on just one participant and there are just 1,000 locations. So it computes all the clusters and return. And using Cerebral Cortex, I can also visualize that GPS clusters. So it's simple as dot plot GPS coordinates and the zoom. So you can see there's different clusters there, and you can increase the zoom as well programmatically and get to more details. So this is all synthetic data. It doesn't represent to any participant or any user, or these are all random location inside Memphis. Okay, so you can write, as I said, you can write your code in Cerebral Cortex, but to write your code, you can use your laptop or desktop machine to write code that you will write for Pandas or SciPy or Python or any other libraries. Writing code is same as writing code for any other library. In terms of resources, like you don't need a special cloud to test or run. So you can write code and debug Cerebral code on your laptop or desktop computers. Cerebral Cortex code can run parallel on all the cores of your laptop. And if you have money and resources and you want to reduce computation time, you can run the same code on cloud without changing a single line of code. In past, we have used Amazon Web Services to run Cerebral Cortex and perform some computation. We easily scaled Cerebral Cortex to 100 machines with the total 1600 cores. So I'll show you the same example. I show you I was running here on my local machine computing GPS cluster. So I'll move to our MD2K cloud. So I have the same code where I have 46 participants data, 10 million GPS locations. And if I want to use 100 cores on 3 machines, so as you can see, I didn't change a single line. So the same code is running on the cloud. So if I'll run here, so I'll move to Spark GUI to show you. So you can see it is running on 3 machines. It is using 30 different cores on different machines. So this job is running parallel on all the resources available. 200. So for this demo, I just allocated 100 cores, and it automatically sees how many machines it requires to get 100 cores. So it is running, and it is using all the resources, and you can click on each worker to see the job, if job is done, or how much resources it is consuming, and more details of each process. And you can see it took almost similar time, just that it took on my local machine for 1000 data points only. Here we have more than 10 million GPS locations. So I didn't change any single line of code. I ran the same code on cluster and speed up my computation time. So you can see writing code in Cerebral Cortex is easy, it's simplified, and the code can run same on your local machine or on the cloud as well. And Cerebral Cortex comes with stress and brushing end-to-end trained model. So as Tim talked about reproducibility, so we want people to reproduce our results or extend our results or finding. So here you can find the reference to both trained model. So both are UBCOM papers, C-Stress and Amoral. So Cerebral Cortex also contains all the data pre-processing and feature computation code to test the trained model. So if you have your own data, you can use Cerebral Cortex to pre-process the data, compute features, and use our end-to-end trained model to see the results. And stay tuned, there would be more in future. And if you want to have the whole Cerebral Cortex on your machine, so it's as simple as just running these 3 commands. You clone Cerebral Cortex on your machine, get inside Cerebral Cortex folder, and run the command docker compose up. Once the docker compose up is ready, you can just see that the Docker Compose will show you all the services are online, up and running. So on my local laptop, it has 8 cores, and it took just 15 minutes to set up everything. But it depends on your internet speed as well, because it downloads all the pre-built Docker images from Docker Hub. So if you have slow speed, so you can expect to have longer time. And we also have all the instructions from installing Docker to installing Cerebral Cortex online. So on this Git, where you can, on GitHub, you can go on Cerebral Cortex page. Here we have all the instructions for macOS and Linux, how you can install from start, like installing Docker, Docker Compose, and then again these 3 commands to set up everything on your local machine. So once it's up, so we have for macOS as well. For Windows, there are some issues with the virtualization, so you might have some. Currently it's not supported on Windows, so I will recommend you to use it on Linux. So once everything is up, you can have the same Jupyter interface I have, and it will contain all the demos that I presented and talked about. So you can go and play with them. So you'll have all these pages with all the instructions, how you can run and what each method is doing. So those demos are available. So once you'll set up, you'll have this kind of interface where you have different demos and the sample data and demo algorithms, everything is there. So it's easy to install locally or on your cloud. So I'll give the mic back to Tim now, so he can talk more about the overall architecture of Cerebral Cortex. Tim?
Can you share your slides again? Just go to the next slide. Thank you. So what we, Ali, you need to leave those up.
Yeah.
Thank you. So what Ali has basically talked about is really 2 boxes in the middle of the screen, which are labeled feature computation and marker computation. The platform itself is a much larger system, and it's designed not only to support this kind of computation aspect and the modeling aspects, but to also handle real-time streaming data from kind of field cell phones. So we have a corresponding component called Cerebrum, which we have other webinars on, about how we deploy and collect data from individuals in the field for the purposes of research studies. And some of these platforms and aspects are related to that. For more information, you can see our websites and see our documentation. So next, please. Later this year, in April, April 21st specifically, we're going to be doing a hands-on tutorial session in Sydney, Australia, as part of CPS IoT Week. This is a tentative outline where we're going to be talking about the principled approaches to doing computational modeling, data visualization, computation pipelines, a much more detailed dive into kind of this what you heard from Ali today. And this is where we'll deploy the system, look at real-world data, and go from there. So if you want more information about this tutorial, please go to md2k.org/tutorials, and you'll find a link to our tutorial page, which will give you all of the details about all these sessions. And as we have more information, we'll post it here in terms of the venue and more specifics. These are not available yet from the conference, so we can't tell them to you today. There you go. We have a lot of ongoing work, and a few things I will highlight today are scaling this platform out so that it's easier to use in all of the clouds. One of the challenges with things like Apache Spark and Docker is they don't work seamlessly all the time with every cloud environment. Kubernetes is one of those technologies that everybody has been going towards, and we will be pursuing this as a way to kind of unify our platform and make it easily deployable across lots and lots of systems. We have work on provenance and metadata standardization, where we're looking at how do we build end-to-end traceability within the system. So everything from when the data is ingested, like Ali was describing about how you describe your data, and how we trace all of the computations and transformation that go on throughout the system, including things like assigning confidence scores to values. So if I apply a sequence of models to my data to transform it for various reasons, what are the types of confidence that we have on the ultimate outcomes? So we're looking at how we introduce and include those kind of concepts in these big data systems. We have we're working with an IEEE working group on metadata standardization as a way to just unify how we describe all of this data. We have hundreds, if not thousands, of independent streams that we've generated over the years within our own data sets. How do we standardize just the representation of that information across even larger research communities? And then we're also looking at, as part of one of our projects, how to incorporate things from the Internet of Things domains. So infrastructure-based sensors, whether it's cars or houses or whatever, into this platform. It prevents a different type of data from our generally human-centric wearable sensors. So that has its own set of challenges. All of this information is available on our GitHub page, md2k.org on GitHub. And there you will find, 70 or 80 different repositories of various projects that we've done. Cerebral Cortex is one of them, and Ali showed you the link to that earlier. There is documentation available. You can go to our MD2K page or to the read the docs for the kernel, which is the core piece of what powers this whole thing. So with that, was that the last slide, Ali?
Yep. So
with that, we'd like to go ahead and open the floor for some questions. Brian or Vivek, do you have things from the chat that we want to start with?
I would suggest just opening it up to questions.
Okay. Opening it to questions then.
Yeah, people are all on mute. Mm-hmm.
Hi, gentlemen. This is Shahin from Memphis. Thank you so much for this informative presentation and giving such a good survey of the system and the architecture. Coming at this, as I often do, from the human subject's perspective and privacy, and I know that that's been a big intentional component of building the system and thinking about the system. Can you discuss or describe some of that thought process as the system was designed and thought out?
Sure. So, yeah, so for privacy, all the data that we are collecting from users is encrypted. We use encryption channels and we pass the keys along the data, and all the data is passed over SSL layer from user mobile phone to our cloud. And once it's on the cloud, we also encrypt all the data. We use encrypted hard drives to store all the data. And so as we are using Jupyter, so it can be accessible to different participants. So to handle those kind of things, we are building on a layer that can restrict data access. If you don't have access to the data, then you won't be able to access. So that layer is still in process. So that data access layer would be there in Cerebral Cortex that will apply all the privacy rules on the cloud as well. And currently on the phone, if you are saying, I don't want to collect data, you can just remove and nothing would be uploaded on the cloud. This answers your question?
It does, and I'm excited to hear about these data access new functionalities that will allow for people to explore information that is of utility to them, but restricts them and not allow them to see information they shouldn't be seeing. So thank you very much for your response.
Ali and Tim had another question. So very, very nicely presented, and the demo, I think, really helped. So the question again, just thinking of myself as a researcher or from the perspective of the students working in this area. So you talked about one data set, the MORAL data set. There are several other open data sets available to the research community, like from the Student Life Project or from the UCI repository. Are there any plans to provide modules to ingest those data so that those who are downloading this platform, they can get to work with other publicly available data sets?
Yes, so as I mentioned, so if you have a custom data, so that all the data for example, you have separate data that is not CSV based, and if you want to import, you can just simply write a Python method that can parse that file and pass it to this one, and it will import. So let's say if you have sensory data that you want to import, that CSV parser is sufficient to parse that sensory data to import all the data in Cerebral Cortex. So if you don't have data other than CSV, if you have the data other than CSV format, then you can just simply write a parser and you can import the data. So in future, maybe we will add a couple of more parsers. So to simply just import those parsers, pass those parsers there, and import all the data for all the publicly released big data sets.
Thank you.
This is Vincent Berardi from Chapman University, and I have a project where I need to classify streaming data from a mobile phone in real time, and you had mentioned Cerebrum before, so I'm just wondering if this is the sort of application that platform was developed to handle, and if you could talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so Cerebrum is a mobile app that collects sensory data. So that's just a user of this cloud. So there could be any other application, any IoT device, or any other mobile phone that can upload data to this cloud.
Let me chime in here real quick. We made an intentional architecture decision when we built our mobile app, so that anything that needed to be handled in absolute real time, I don't know what your real time constraints are, but our real time constraints were on the order of minutes. And so any types of algorithms that process data, we actually did that in phone. And you can find this from the paper that we published in Census about 3 years ago. So what this system is not built today. I'm not saying it can't eventually support it, which it doesn't support a streaming interface from the phone to the cloud and back.
Gotcha. Could you provide a link to the paper you were talking about with or just give me the information for the paper with the info calculation?
Yeah, it's called, if you look for Census and M Cerebrum.
Okay.
It's also available on our webpage, but yeah, if you just Google Census M Cerebrum, it'll be from Monowar Hussain in 2017.
Thank you.
Yeah, just to add one more point. So current Cerebral Cortex architecture doesn't support streaming, but you can upload data and request the data back again on the application, or that application could be a mobile phone. So you can upload, the cloud can process all the data, produce some results, and phone can request the results and provide those results to the users.
Gotcha. Thanks.
Ali, I mean, there is a question from Professor Stephen Intelli from Northeastern. Vivek, do you want to read the question?
I think, yeah, I was going to, I think Tim has access. Tim, do you want to respond? Tim and Ali, you want to respond?
I think we should read the question here. So, see, it appears there are some small examples to play with. Are there examples to demonstrate that the system works with huge amounts of data in the cloud? Terabytes were mentioned, I believe. How would someone consider using the system convince themselves that they will not run into problems when trying to use new large data sets? What will happen? I would say this. Under the hood, we leverage Apache Spark quite heavily to deal with this big data listing, or the big data processing. And the storage abstractions we use are either they're compatible with Spark. So as long as you have enough physical storage capacity to handle that terabyte of data, then it will be able to ingest that information. The assumption that we're making here is that the individual units of computation. So, for example, say you have a routine that does windowed computation and computes some features. The assumption we make is that the amount of data inside that window is sufficiently small that it fits in memory of whatever computing platform you're using for a single window. The parallel abstractions of Spark will allow us to kind of bring things in and push things out of memory. This is also what allows us to scale this stuff to clusters as well. I don't know of an existing data set in the terabyte range that's publicly available. If there is, we'd like to know about it, and maybe that's one we can include as part of the standard ingestion process and use in our examples. In our own cloud environment, we're looking at 50 to 100 terabytes of information. Now, granted, we're running that on 15 or so computers. But even that, we don't have that amount of RAM, so we're still reading it from disk, processing it, and going from there.
Yeah, just to answer the second part of the question. So the answer is yes, and there are some parameters so you can run on your local machine, but it might take months to process all the 1 terabyte data. It depends on your local machine specification. So as I mentioned in the document, in the presentation, that if you have money and resources, you want to scale or reduce the computation time, you can run on the cloud the same code. So same code will for sure run on the cloud as well, and it will reduce the computation time. It will run on your laptop as well, but it will take months to process, depending if you have 4 cores, 60 cores laptop, depending on your hardware configuration. So running same code on the cloud is just to reduce the computation time. And we have posted the paper reference in the chat for the MC room.
You're welcome.
Hi, Ali. Can you hear me?
Yes.
This is Tushar. I'm from OSU, Professor Emery student. I wanted to ask about, so you mentioned that currently Cerebral Cortex GitHub repository installation, so the Docker image is not supported on Windows. So we had some IT limitations and we were able to run it on Windows. So I just wanted to make sure if we are able to run it, is it like some feature is incomplete, or is the if you're able to run it, is there a problem that we don't know of? Because as long as the libraries I have used of the Cerebral Cortex, they were working fine. So I just wanted to make sure, is there an incomplete feature we don't know about, or something that is incorrectly happening in the background?
Okay, so
Tushar,
just
since you're kind of part of MD2K, I'd love to know what you did to make this work on Windows. So if you could follow up via email, that would be great.
Yeah, sure, I will. Yeah.
Yeah, Ollie, go ahead.
Yeah, so I said on Windows we have instructions, but it may not work. So Windows has some limitations. So that's why I said on Windows it may not work. So we have tested on Linux and macOS, but those are platforms. So no matter which platform you are using, you will have the same functionality, same features, availability. So there is nothing that Linux will contain more features or Windows will contain more features. So the number of features available in Cerebral Cortex are same for any operating system that you're using.
Right, because the container, the Docker image contains everything, right? So as
Yes.
long as it runs, it works. Okay. Okay, thank you.
Yes. So if there's no question, I just want to say, if you want to contribute, please contribute. The whole Cerebral Cortex is modular. All the documentation is online. If you want to read the code, all the code is documented. Each method, how you can run, pass, which parameter it accepts. So if you have any feature that you computed, you wrote code in Python, and you contributed into Cerebral Cortex, it would be used by others as well. So it will reduce other people's computation time. And whole Cerebral Cortex is modular. So if you want to contribute one module, you just have to create one Python class and send us a pull request. So on our GitHub page, we have all the instructions how you can contribute back to us. So if you're using Cerebral Cortex, if you want to contribute some code that you wrote for Cerebral Cortex, you're welcome to contribute now GitHub repo.
Terrific. Nazir, Tim, thank you again, and also to the MD2K team for your efforts and work on this kind of common good project that will be very useful to the rest of the mHealth community. Thank you again for coming and sharing the update on Cerebral Cortex. Probably at some point we should have a follow-up on the updated mCerebrum. Just a reminder to the audience that a recorded version of this webinar will be posted on the MD2K's mHealth Hub. To access, go to md2k.org. Again, I thank you all for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you at the next webinar. Bye now.